Hi everyone, welcome to another virtual lunchtime lecture here at the Frisco Historic Park and Museum. Today we are talking with Tom Fuller as he talks us through historic preservation and wildfires. Tom is the Heritage Project Manager of the White River National Forest, and in a very timely moment, he is also helping to manage the current wildfires out on the western slope. Don't forget, you can actually view all of our lunchtime lectures on our Facebook page, our website, friscohistoricpark.com, and the Town of Frisco's YouTube page. We do ask if you have any questions for Tom that you just leave them in the comments, and we will answer them at the end of our lecture. But without further ado, please join me in giving a virtual welcome to Tom Fuller.
Hello, I'm Tom Fuller. I'm the Heritage Program Manager on the White River National Forest. I am both an archaeologist and a historian, and I have the responsibility of protecting our cultural resources on the White River National Forest. This is going to be about the effects of wildfires on historic resources and how we try to protect heritage resources on the forest and what we do when we can't protect them. This is an interesting talk for me. I had planned to spend several days prepping this, and then 2 days ago, this is what happened. I had it all planned out to do it in a certain way, and at approximately 1:35, the power went out on August 10th. 1:45, I got an urgent call from a coworker working at home to look out the back windows of the office. She was excited, and not a good way. And I got to the windows at 1:46, and this is what I see. And that is the start of the Grizzly Fire that we are currently being impacted by here in Glenwood Springs. At this point, I can't tell whether it's over the ridge on the other side of the river, the Colorado River, where it is, if it's coming towards us or not. It was pretty scary at that point, and I start to alert other coworkers at the office, and I get reports on the fire's location and what to do next. This is what we do in real time. Is as soon as the fire's location is confirmed, which was at mile marker 120 on the north side of Glenwood Canyon, I start to look at our GIS database to see what cultural resources could be impacted by both the fire and the resulting suppression efforts. And then I confirm with a deputy supervisor that our main cultural resource concerns are also the historic Glenwood Springs water system and power lines at the bottom of the canyon. Those were the historic resources most in impact zone at this time. The water system is both historic and currently used, and it's where we get our water from both the Grizzly Creek and the No Name Creek. And the power lines at the bottom of the canyon come from the Shoshone power plant, hydraulic water powered plant. After that, I step aside from my Heritage Program Manager duties, and I begin to try to contact coworkers from our supervisor's office that are out in the field that day to tell them about the fire and to explain that I-70 is closed and they need to find alternative routes home. Since we're here in Glenwood Springs, the workers and specialists here in our office cover from Dillon, Hoosier Pass, all the way out to Rifle and past Rifle, all the way north to Meeker, all the way south to Marble, Independence Pass. We have a huge forest that we cover from this distance. So making sure we are in contact with who's out in the field and letting them know what's going on is really important. The cultural resources that are not a concern at this time, safety is number one. I've got to get, friends back here. The next morning, I get the first fire perimeter, which is a GIS shapefile layer, and start to scope out what cultural resources are in the 1 mile radius and then a 5 mile radius of the fire perimeter. We have a new heritage database that allows me to do this in minutes, which used to take hours. These produce reports with maps and I get these to essential staff who are planning the response of the fire. We started out with a type 3 team immediately, and today we transitioned to a type 2 team, and tomorrow we're transitioning to a type 1 team. The 3 to 2 to 1 is an increasing amount of resources to fight the fire. Since the water system is also a historic resource, I make another map showing the intakes and outflows for the aqueducts as an important resources to protect if possible. And I'm also on the first video meeting working on fire planning, working with groups known as READs, which are resource advisors, and they cover all the different resources for a fire, the hydraulics, plants, animals, recreation, cultural resources, of course, and we all work together in doing fire planning to protect those resources if possible. And then this was yesterday morning, and it started to even go bigger, so this was fun. So the whole time I've been planning this talk, I've been dealing with this fire at the same time. And this was this morning, and it had been pretty smoky here in the office. My voice might start to break up a little bit, but it's getting a little bit better right now as we have a breeze that's come into town. As you can see, trying to protect heritage resources during an active wildfire is quite the challenge. It's an ever-changing process that involves knowledge of fire management and behavior. We are, as the Heritage Program, we're obligated to try and preserve historic and prehistoric sites that are eligible for or listed on the National Register of Historic Places. But nothing is more important than life and safety. We try not to put people in unsafe situations. This is an actual picture I took from a night prescribed fire I was working on that didn't seem that safe to me at that point, but everybody assured me we were okay. We're going to talk about archaeological sites, and archaeological sites can be both historic sites and prehistoric sites. The standards set by the Advisory Council of Historic Preservation and State Historic Preservation Offices are site in general has to be 50 years old or older. Now this started out in, when they started using that in the 60s or 70s as a guideline. And the tricky thing about that is you've got people like me that now say, well, if I left a can someplace when I was a kid, is that a historic site now? But we have the other side of that where we have areas like the Vail Pass Highway interstate system that's not quite 50 years old yet, but is on the National Register because of its significance architecturally and the planning that involved using, trying not to disturb the natural environment. So it doesn't have to be 50 years old to be a site, but in general, that's what we use. We also have a site versus isolated find. An isolated find or occurrence is just simply something like one arrowhead, one projectile point, one dendroglyph on an aspen tree. And then we have, like I said, there's three kinds of sites. There's prehistoric, which in this area is generally thought to be anything prior to about the 1820s and 30s when the earliest European explorers were in the area. We do have some Spanish explorers that were in Colorado before that time. So those would still be historic sites, but anything after that is considered to be historic, and then contemporary, like I said, for Vail Pass. Now we're talking about wildfire effects to historic resources, the reason for this talk, and there's the different categories. There's direct effects, which would be obviously burning of wooden structures, weakening of masonry and cracked rocks within structures, loss of information. We could have bottle glass identification ruined by the bottle glass being melted that we could no longer make out the codes on the glass. Obsidian hydration is a way of checking the actual dates of obsidian rock that had been turned into chipstone, flakestone tools. And when you flake obsidian, it sets in time a hydration loss sequence that can give us an actual time range of how long ago that happened. And if that gets burned over in a fire, we lose that data. Other effects would be loss of undocumented arborglyphs. If we have a aspen carving that's, hasn't been recorded and gets burned over, we lose that chance of being able to, find out what that information is. And also in direct effects are when rocks and rock art can be spalled, and that would cause the rock to spall off in the rock art panel, and you lose that. Indirect would be post-fire impacts to a site. Post-fire erosion impacts are the most common post-fire impacts. Other things can happen like trees falling on a site or thing like that, but the erosion impacts are anytime because of the fire itself, water damage and mud flows, ash flows can cover up sites. And we do have a operational organization called BEAR, which is Burned Area Emergency Response, that starts on fires right away to look at how the post-fire impacts from the fire could have impact both cultural sites, other, all kinds of other resources. There's obviously smoke damage to rock art, and then operational effects would be the construction of dozer lines, hand lines, and the use of fire retardant. What we try to do operationally is to avoid the sites in pre-fire planning or at the start of fire planning. That's what I've been doing the last couple of days. We want to know where dozer operation is planned. Sometimes we can use dozer operation to actually protect sites if they're of major significance. We also fire wrap structures if we can get in there ahead of time. This was at Zion Canyon of a cable, logging cable structure where they lowered logs from the top of the canyon over 2,000 feet down to the bottom. And the one part of it you can see to the left is hanging off the canyon. So we didn't put any of the fire crew out that far. We just wrapped what we could on the side that could have been impacted by that. We also talk during operation, like right now today, is we'll have certain areas that we want to prevent from getting laced with, slurry fire retardant. And those are generally areas that are significant to the tribes. So where I meant to start before all this craziness happened the last couple days is back in July 6, 2017, the Peak 2 fire in the Dillon Ranger District near Breckenridge. And it was kind of funny coming back to the White River Forest. I've been working all around the country in Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, California, Nebraska. And then I get back to my home state of Colorado, my home forest, and everybody tells me, well, this is the forest that doesn't burn. So I'm going to show you this video right now to show how crazy the Peak Fire got so quick. And we'll start it. Hopefully. Why is it? It didn't start. There we go.
All right, so I'm over here at this fire over in between Frisco and Breckenridge, and this thing is absolutely exploding right now. You can see the flames. I'm about 5 miles away across the valley, and you can see the flames are like 200 feet in the air here. They've had one flame drop a fire retardant on it so far, but the wind just kicked up a little bit, probably here, and the flames are just climbing straight up, and they are enormous. Absolute insanity how fast this fire is moving. 2 hours ago, it was like the size of a campfire. Now it's climbing straight up the mountain. Absolutely crazy. Tons of beetle kill over there. Just got tons and tons of fresh fuel. That'll go up like matchsticks. And it's only, I'd say it's only about a mile or two away from Breckenridge, the ski resort on Peak 8 or Peak 6. The first run on Peak 6 is to the far left, and it's not that far away from there. You get some headway, easily make it over there. These flames have just tripled in size since I've seen it, since I got up here. I'm in the Breck Islands above it, and this is probably the best vantage out of anywhere, because you can see the whole thing, but wow, it's absolutely crazy.
So I'm here at the office, and we get the word that the Peak 2 fire has started. We begin to gather information. You can see from the maps below, unfortunately, they use blue for both sites and the fire, but the fire perimeter that I earlier got is shown on the map to the right. And all those little spots in there are archaeological or historic or prehistoric sites. And the early perimeter, I can see there's several sites that can be impacted, especially that one site right in the middle. And that's site 5ST732. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a cute name to go along with the site, the name of the sawmill that was there. So we get a general idea of the site's location. That's that first perimeter we got. And that's just kind of a guess at that point. And we start to work with resource advisors from our staff that we had over there on the Dillon Ranger District, and let them know there are historic sites within the sites and adjacent to the sites. And we provide them with these maps to show where the actual sites are. The site 5ST732, and what the site number is a Smithsonian number. And the 5 stands for Colorado, ST is Summit County, and 1732 is the 1,732 site that is recorded in Summit County. So that gives you an idea of how many historic and prehistoric sites are in Summit County. And there's more than that, but that's at that time what the number was. So it's an historic sawmill complex with 3 cabins, a bridge, possibly a stable that are in the middle of the fire perimeter. It is eligible for the National Register. And where we got that from is a recording in 1999 during one of our projects to deal with the beetle kill. And we will go out before a project like that and do archaeological pedestrian survey to see what sites are out there, what could be impacted by going out and basically doing, in that case, taking out all the beetle kill if we had somebody that was actually going to buy the trees. There are other sites that are nearby that are threatened. We give instructions for site protection if it is safe for firefighters to work on them. But as you can see from the video, it was not safe for anybody to get in there ahead of that fire. We could look at sites that were on the back side of it, but at that point, along with the fire, the forest is so thick with the beetle kill lodgepole that it's really unsafe for firefighters to approach, the sites that are to the south because of the high winds. Because of the threat to Breckenridge, air support came in vigorously and attacked the flame front heading south. And that's really what stopped the fire. We couldn't have done it without air support. And they come in with the heavy slurry bombers and the helicopter drops. And we knew the one site didn't stand a chance. We couldn't protect it. So later we'll record the damage. And here are 2 of the cabins as recorded in 1999. You can see when we say cabins, they're not necessarily still standing, but they're the remnants of cabins with the trees that have grown up and through them. But we have we can tell from the different techniques of building the cabin, and then we look at the dumps and look at the bottles, the glass, and we can get a good idea of when this site was occupied. And this was during the late 1800s, I believe. And we also, into the turn of the century. I think. And we also, get information from GLO maps. So look at the General Land Office maps from the late 1800s through the 1900s. They'll often have these buildings on their maps, so we can see, it's on a map from, say, 1905, so we know it was there at least in 1905. Here's the site map that was drawn during the recording, and you can see there's cabins and possibly stables, a bridge. And here's when we finally get out to record the damage later on. Now, this was actually done this year, 3 years later, because we couldn't get out and immediately because it wasn't safe. They did go out and start to clear the Colorado Trail, so it became safe to get out there. Unfortunately, last year I was injured, so I couldn't get out to the site, and so we finally were able to get out this year to record the damage. This is approaching the burn scar from the north, from the Miners Gulch area on the Colorado Trail. And here's one of our Forest Service staff reviewing the burn scar. You can see the Colorado Trail here has been cleared of snags, and the site is going to be around the corner in the bottom of that valley that the trail is going to. And as they approach the site, here's the first indication. It was a stack of logs that had burned over. And then we start to see one of the, the cabins are gone. You can see where the sill logs were, where some remnants of the cabins are, but it's all, the platform is the only thing that's remaining there. And here's an example of burned over trash. These hole and top cans give us a really good indication for dating the site. There's been a system devised where we can look at a can like this, and from the diameter of the hole in the cap and the size of the can, we can get a date range for when that can was produced. So there is some datable material still used, but this has already been recorded, so it's nothing new to add. Here again is an outline of another cabin that's gone. You can see where the sill logs were, the base of the cabin, everything has been burned. And this is where they suspect the sawmill itself was. You can see this pipe that's coming down, and the pipe extends from one of the drainages down into the sawmill. So the objectives of our post-fire visit were to examine the site for overall condition. We photograph and document the damage on site revisit forms and adverse effects forms to sites. This helps us evaluate if the site still retains integrity. We make recommendations to prevent further damage if there's things that we can do to that. Say there's an erosional channel that's going to come through a site and go through, say, a trash dump and expose that even more. After we compile all this, we send the report off to the Colorado State Historic Preservation Officer. If it is a Native American site, we'll send a similar report to the tribes with an ancestry or current tie to the area. The tribes we work with mainly on the White River are the Southern Ute tribe, the Ute Mountain Ute tribe, and the Ute Indian tribe of the Uinta and Ouray Reservation. They're the connection to this area. They've been here since time began. The Arapaho tribes and other plains tribes would come up into the area to hunt occasionally, but the Utes were the ones that were mainly in this area for the last thousands of years. The verdict we have on this site is that it's lost most of its integrity. All the wood structures are basically gone. There's really no more data that can likely be recovered from the site, so therefore it's no longer eligible for the National Register. What this recommendation will do is it will change it to a not eligible site, which means if there's any work to be done in the area, we won't probably, bend our backs to protect it. we do often protect not eligible sites if we can, but it changes the status of their protected status. So that was that with that site. I'm going to go through a few things that we can do ahead of time to try to protect sites. A lot of these photos are from when I worked on the Grand Canyon, and we're protecting sites ahead of prescribed burns. Some were before other burns that were threatening areas, but a lot of these are from prescribed burn work. And what they're doing right here is we've got an old, it's hard to see, but a can dump is surrounding these trees, and it's an eligible can dump because it's associated with a certain activity within the canyon on the south rim. So one thing we found that works pretty well instead of digging all the time is to use a powered air blower to get off the layer of duff to get down to mineral soil to help create a black line, which we would do around this can dump. Here we're doing the same thing around a wickiup structure. And this is about 800 years old from what we found out earlier from doing some dendrochronology on it. And we will burn out off that line ahead of time. And then we will wrap it with fire wrap. And this fire wrap is the same stuff that's used for fire shelters. Actually, this is all leftover shelter material. Once the shelters start to break down because they're in a folded package, they're no longer used as fire shelters for the firefighters, but we can unfold them and use them to protect wooden structures. We also have big sheets, rolls of that fire wrap to use. This is another technique we can use. This is a foam system used on a wooden water catchment system that was at the park for a ranger station in the early 1900s. And this catchment system was a way of collecting water for the rangers to have at their station. And we're protecting it with this foam. It's ecologically safe. It will break down. It won't damage the wood that much. Here we're wrapping not a historic structure, but this is a air monitoring station at the south rim of the Grand Canyon. Again, you can see we're doing our best with the fire wrap to try to protect it if any embers or other things come down and catch it on fire. It's a little hard to see, but there's a ladder on this ponderosa tree, and this ladder goes way up to the top. It's a lookout station, a historic lookout station on the south rim of the Grand Canyon. And you can see we've taken all the duff away from the base of the ponderosa there. Ponderosa naturally has protection against fire too with their bark, but this will help even more. And you can see this is after the fire came through, and it reduced all the duff in the area, and that was the object, is reducing the fuels, and the mineral helped protect the ladder very well. This is a really cool site inside of the Grand Canyon that I didn't know about, and our fire staff that were in on this fire early ahead of time told me about, and so I got to fly into this fire and record this site. So sometimes fires are, obviously they're beneficial to the environment, but sometimes because of what happens, we find out about sites that we didn't know about. And the guys that are on the firefighting crew, these guys here, are the ones that really help us out. And I just ran into a crew the other day that was out on a smaller fire locally from Mammoth Lakes. Happened to meet them at a city market and said, "Hey, you guys been out on anything?" And they said, "Yeah, we were on the Lincoln Fire." And I was able to ask them if they saw any historic resources out there, because we really didn't have any good survey of the area. And they said, no, there was nothing within the fire, but we found this cool Arborglyph 200 feet uphill from the fire. So now we know it's there. The fire crews are awesome at protecting our historic resources when they can, and they'll tell us when they find new stuff. So you got to give it up for these guys and gals. That's it. This is yesterday. The Grizzly Fire here jumped the Colorado River, and now it's on the south side of the river. And this is an awesome shot showing the fire support and how big that cloud is from that. And I'll be glad to answer any questions that we might have.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. That was really interesting, especially when you think about finding these things as the fire happens. That is, some of these places just aren't seen by humans very often. So that's really interesting. One of the questions that we have is asking more about the Buffalo Fire. I think it was 2018, 19, and more about what happened during the Buffalo Fire.
So on the Buffalo Fire, it was a similar situation for us here on the staff. And we had a good portion of that fire perimeter had already been surveyed for, again, for beetle kill reduction. So we knew of some sites up there, but there was no eligible sites up there. And fortunately, too, one of our engine captains, Eric White on the Dillon Ranger District, I worked with Eric back in the day on the Kaibab National Forest, and he was a para-archaeologist working with us there. And Eric, along with being a firefighter, is an excellent biologist, and he was an excellent para-archaeologist. So I always know when I've got him out there, he'll let me know if they find anything new or anything important, and then I'll double check with what we already know. So there was no other significant sites on the Buffalo Fire, but we were on it right away. And it was, 2018 was exciting because it started out with the Buffalo Fire. Then we had the big fires on this side. We had the Lake Christine Fire that grew and grew. And we had the Cache Fire south of Rifle. And then we had the Cabin Lake Fire up in the Meeker area. So for the forest that never burns, 2018 was proving us a little wrong. And we really upped our fire game in preparation after that year. So we were prepared for this year.
That's great. I know we talked briefly about this when you and I were chatting a little bit earlier before our lecture started. Tell us a little bit more about your history. You mentioned that you're a archaeologist and a historian. How did you manage to find yourself in the position you're in now?
Well, I've got a classic story of being a ski bum. And I started up in Summit County at Arapahoe Basin, made my way over to Eagle County and worked at Vail and Beaver Creek, mostly at Beaver Creek. And I got to the point where I really wanted to, do more than just be a ski bum. I worked hospitality and retail, but I'd always been interested in history and archaeology. And I went back to school at Colorado Mountain College. And I happened that my physical anthropology professor was Mike Metcalf of Metcalf Archeology. Mike is well known as one of the premier archaeologists in Colorado. And at that point, I was in my late 20s, and Mike said, "Tom, you're really good at this. Have you ever thought about being an archaeologist?" And I said, "I didn't know it was a job besides, being a professor." And I found out all about cultural resource management, which is what we do as archaeologists. We go out in front of any kind of projects, and in the Forest Service, we have all kinds of projects. But in the real world, we also have, anything from pipelines to road work. I've worked on, I worked on E470 on the site there. I worked on another site on one of the E's in Colorado and Denver area. I worked as a private archaeologist from North Dakota to Texas to here in Wyoming. And I really enjoyed that work. Got to do some mitigation, some testing, some excavation as it's known. But I was tired of moving around all the time, and I wanted to get into a stable position at one place. And I thought, hey, there's those guys in the Forest Service and the BLM that we go to get our information before we start a project for them. How do I get one of those jobs? And so I started applying for federal jobs. And I started out on the Kaibab National Forest on the north side of the Grand Canyon. Loved it. Also started to get into fire management work, working on fires as both backup support and as a heritage program, as a worker, as an archaeologist protecting sites. I went from there to working at Zion Canyon National Park and also Pipe Spring National Monument and a little bit at Bryce during that time, then to the Grand Canyon. And then I came back up here for one summer, and then I was back in Arizona on the Apache Sitgraves. And finally, I got my permanent job at Lake Tahoe Basin in California. And it was 8 years of working to get that permanent job. So what people don't understand with the federal service, it often takes a long time of temporary positions before you get the permanent position. And I was at Lake Tahoe from 2010 to 2017 when the job opportunity came back here on my home forest, and I was glad to come back here on my home forest. I've also done details on the Nebraska National Forest and other national forests in California. I've worked fire from New Mexico to California to here to Nevada. So I'm slowing down my fire experience on the fires themselves as I get injured and older, but I still am involved with them every day.
That's great. I mean, I'm sure we can all appreciate you being here and being the person to help manage some of our cultural resources, especially as we face a pretty strong fire season. The last question we have is, obviously we've got some pretty big fires happening, and I feel like this is a great opportunity to share with our viewers how, what can they be doing right now? I know there's a recommended route that they should take if they're trying to get to the western part of Colorado. But could you share a little bit more with us about what people should be doing, what people should be aware of?
Okay, and unfortunately, east-west travel through the mountains of Colorado is going to be a challenge. Right now, Glenwood Canyon I-70 is closed from Glenwood Springs to Dotsero. The recommended route is to go south to Salida and take 50 across to Gunnison and then to Montrose and then back up to Grand Junction, or vice versa. You could go the northern route, but right now, the road south of Meeker into Rifle is being repaired, so it's not recommended to go that way. Also, Cottonwood Pass is closed to traffic. You'll get redirected sometimes there on Google Maps, and it is closed to traffic because of fire operations and travel that way. Independence Pass is also not recommended because, of course, it's a golf cart path in places. You're lucky to get one car to go through in some spots, let alone two. So it's going to be a real challenge for a while. What we're worried about within the canyon, even as the fire burns off, is rockfall into the canyon. And because of where the fire started in the median of the canyon, there can be some issues of whether the road itself is retained its integrity. So it's going to be a challenge for quite a while.
It sounds like it. Is there a website that people can visit to get updates about the fire if they're thinking about it? Could you share that with us?
Great websites on Facebook under the Grizzly Creek Fire, and also on the White River National Forest. We'll have information on the fire there. But if you have Facebook, that's the best option for information. But also the White River National Forest website is we have information on that.
That's great. Thank you. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. I know you're super busy and you've got a very stressful job right now. So again, we want to just thank you for doing what you do and helping keep our cultural resources safe. Is there anything else you wanted to share with our viewers before we end the lecture?
I just want to thank the Frisco Historic Park and Museum. I highly suggest that everybody visit it. It's a great way to spend a few hours. I really was impressed by it. And we've got a lot of other options within areas. Eagle has an excellent little museum, and so does Rifle. Aspen has we have a lot of very cool sites within the forest. And Breckenridge Historic Alliance has got great stuff. So props out to everybody out there. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. As we sign off, I just want to remind everyone we have 2 more weeks before we end our summer lecture series. Next week, Wednesday noon on Facebook Live, we have Gail Marshall with Bear Aware talking to us about the biology of bears and how we can improve our interactions as humans with bears specifically. We are rounding off our summer lecture series with a special lecture from Linda Batlin, who is a historic reenactor. So that's a very special lecture. We're very excited to be able to bring her to you through our channels. If there's anything else you guys have questions about, feel free to leave it in the comments. But other than that, we will be signing off. Thanks so much.